Hello, friends of Studio Brûlé. This is Steve Brûlé, and it is coffee time, time where we go over some of the stuff that's been happening in the world and come across my desk since the last coffee time, which today would be yesterday. But we're going in a little bit different direction today. Warren Farrell is here with me, and who needs no introduction, been a long time researcher and author on issues relating to men and boys in our culture, going back decades upon decades. And today, though, we're even talking about a topic which I don't think Warren, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, has talked about or written about before. Today we're going to be talking about how to work as a men's rights advocate, have compassion for men and boys, and make a living at it. Or at least, in Warren's paraphrased words recently, not go broke. So, with no further ado, I'm going to bring Warren into the show, and we'll get right to it. Hey, Warren. Whoops, I put you on. You're not mute. You're on mute. Oh, here we go. Hi, Warren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Good to hear you.
Did I get that right? You haven't spoken or written on this particular topic before?
I've only did it a couple of times, and interestingly, the one of the two times that I did it was a workshop that was tied into the ICMI, the International Conference of Men's Issues, in Detroit, in which you interviewed me that same weekend for an interview that's now on my web YouTube, and I think on your site. Really an outstanding interview that you did, and then that weekend I did do a workshop because all the people there were on men's issues. We were with men's issues, and it's so important to know how to not go broke dealing with compassion for boys and men, and why that is even the case. Millions and millions of women who have dealt with compassion for women and girls have made a significant living doing it. That is not true with boys and men, and so I'll share why and address what that's about and how to get around it.
Most excellent. And we can add to not going broke to this conversation is how not to get canceled either. There's an awful lot of unpersoning and canceling going on in our culture that goes back years now.
Absolutely. One of the things that's made it harder and harder is that it is very clear that universities, which, when I grew up in, I'm 77 now, and when I grew up when I was 1968 or so on, I was very active in the political movements, and everything that liberals were about was about free speech. And it was the conservatives who were afraid of McCarthy and wanted to have censored speech and so on. Now the tables have turned. The liberals in universities are very canceling out of any conservative speakers, and this is the exact opposite of what liberalism meant to me, which was including perspectives from all angles and being able, and it's the opposite of what a university means. And what a university means is to take in perspectives that you do and don't like, and hear different perspectives, and then use what you hear to more deeply research and educate yourself and inspire yourself to grow in your thinking. And this is the exact opposite of what's happened, and particularly, I'm afraid, led by liberals and my feminist colleagues of the 1960s and so on that I used to be a part of.
It's a huge culture war, and it has exploded just in the past couple of weeks. The number of people being deplatformed, canceled, mostly, I think all of it at this point, for this phase of it. Back when it started, probably 10, 20 years ago, it started in a low way. But ever since we've been doing the Flamengo file, and ever since your speech at the University of Toronto, there has been an effort to deplatform and silence views that are unwelcome to the left. Yes, and now that anybody related to Trump now is being unpersoned. Seems.
Here's actually, you just mentioned my speech at the University of Toronto, and that was some years ago, and it was before. I think it was 2016. It was before the boycott.
2012.
Oh, 2012.
8 years have passed, Warren.
Now listen, Steve. I'm trying to reduce the amount of years that.
It's a lost cause, Warren. You can't get them years back.
Your younger audience won't appreciate that, but your older audience will, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, so in 2012, I was invited. This is 6 years before the Boy Crisis book came out, and I was invited to speak on the Boy Crisis because the people at the University of Toronto and the cafe, the Canadian Association for Equality, knew that I was writing the book. And so they invited me up there to speak. And as I get up there, I hear that there is a protest forming. And now I'm really a strong supporter of protests. I've been politically active all my life, and free speech and protests, that's really core to a portion of what democracy is about. But what this group was doing was, first of all, was a group of Socialist Worker Party feminists, and they one teacher had read some excerpt from a few sentences in the Myth of Male Power book, and she used that out of context to say that I was in favor of rape. And so, that's the last thing in the world that I'm in favor of. It's just anyone that would be in favor of rape would have my enmity until they got over it. And so I started to. So I started to enter the university. I had only met a protest once before, and that was outside a town hall in New York. And it was only a small group of protesters. So I went up to the 5 protesters outside in the town hall in New York, and I asked them, if you come in, can we make a deal? You come in and listen to my talk, and if do not interrupt it. But at the end, anything you have to say or want to say, I will listen to, answer, and address. Is that a deal? And they said, absolutely. By the end of the talk at town hall, I specifically pointed out and said, any comments you have? And they all go, nope, you make 100% sense. So sorry, we were doing the protest. At the University of Toronto, the scene was very different. I proposed to the policeman who had picked me up as a result of hearing about the protest, that he allowed me to get out of the police car and to talk to the protesters. And he said, Warren, this is a different scene altogether. These people are giving the finger to the police. They're reaching out, and if the police don't back off, they would hit them. And the police are just the University of Toronto police. They're not allowed to touch these protesters. There's no dimension of reason there. And moreover, Warren, they are blocking the entrance to your speaking. And so I said, oh, that is different. That shows, first of all, that is something I'm completely opposed to. Protesting, yes, but blocking the entrance for people to go in, no. And so I get there, and the shouting is so loud. I am in the green room. I'm brought into the green room way back. The green room has between it the green room, closed door, curtain blocking the sound, a full auditorium, a set of doors, and then a second set of doors. And then there's the protesters. I was able to hear what the protesters were saying, which was F. Warren Farrell, so clearly that I picked up the phone, called my wife, Liz, and said to her, listen to what you hear. And she was able to hear the F. Warren Farrell from the protesters through all of those barriers, to give you some sense. And you, Steve, if I recall correctly, you had been there to interview me and other people about fathers' rights issues. You were planning to go home. You heard about the protest. You figured you'd stay around a little while. And fortunately, you did, because 2 things happened. One is you did a really good film of the protesters that anyone can look up to this day. Secondly, it garnered almost 1 million views. Third, it is, and this is what I'm all leading to about making a living doing this. Here was, I would probably have been torn apart if I had appeared before that group. And yet, as a result of your filming that protest, CAFE, the Canadian Association for Equality, said that generated such an interest in boys and men's issues that it helped them to form multiple chapters throughout Canada and made men's issues created the awareness of men's issues throughout Canada in a way that allowed them to raise money and to begin to form an infrastructure that is much more elaborate today than it was at the time. And that, I'm saying all that because it's a metaphor for what is needed to make a living doing boys and men's issues work. There are many people that would, so all protests and all movements have multiple dimensions to them. When I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, we had radical left socialists, and we had very conservative, much more conservative mainstream women, like the National Organization for Women. I was on their board of directors in New York City, and so and many people now were really angry at the people that were more radical, and people who were radical thought that now we're just sort of stick in the mud mainstream liberals. But then there were academics who were afraid to do anything, but they were very good at writing articles and doing research, and they would often be mocked because they didn't come out to demonstrations and do anything. And where am I going with this? Where I'm going is that every single part, whatever your personality is, look inside of you, see what you are comfortable with, and what is your way of contributing, and do not be inhibited by people who say, "Oh, you're too right, you're too left, you're too activist, you're not activist enough." It takes all of those pieces together to create the puzzle that creates a picture for people to see, other than the picture of we live in a world dominated by a patriarchy in which men made the rules to benefit men at the expense of women. And so the first step I'm asking you to take is look inside of yourself and find out what is your personality most comfortable with. And then something that will sound almost contradictory to this, challenge yourself to move out of your comfort zone. You will contribute even if you don't move out of your comfort zone. But why not grow and become a deeper, better, broader human being in the process of doing this and move out of your comfort zone? If you're afraid to go to a demonstration, go to a demonstration. Take it step by step. If you're afraid of writing an academic article because you don't think you have anything serious to say, get into research, try it out, see what you can do. If you have an idea and your wife or your husband or somebody else says, "Yeah, that's a really good idea," take it to heart and see if you can develop that. Create an op-ed out of it. It won't get published, but see what else you can do with that op-ed that won't be in the New York Times, which will never understand or publish anything you say that is supportive of boys and men's issues, unless you are a major exception to the rule.
You can do your own blog too.
And that's yeah, Steve. Why don't you take that and do, Steve, and also share what you are doing now and how did you do this that is allowing you to contribute in the way that you're contributing to boys and men's issues.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I got in this kind of accidentally, to be honest. But I was going to comment a little bit first on that the University of Toronto thing. I did not know there was a protest to be had till I got there.
Yeah.
We actually stuck around to see your lecture, and when we came, we went out for dinner. My assistant or partner, I guess, where we're doing the interview with you about the short film Broken, which was a story of two men's lives after divorce, and. I went back to the car and got my camera. When I got there, I thought it was a lineup, and I thought to myself, a lineup for a lecture on a Friday night at a university. I didn't think this was possible. Because, I remember university.
Especially for this boring guy I just had dinner with. They couldn't be coming to see him.
Well, I didn't think that. I just thought, university students don't go to lectures on Friday night when I was at university. By that Friday night, we're getting ready to party. But in any case, I saw the lineup. I thought it was a lineup to get in. I went up, and then I got there, I realized it was a protest. So I went back to the car and got the camera, and then it just went from there. Now, you're right that it was only the campus police at first. But eventually, I think it was maybe an hour later, they had to call the city police in. And when the city police got there, they were much more serious. They broke it up.
Yeah.
And they formed a barrier, and it was somewhat violent. And then of course, the protesters, it wasn't violent, but the protesters weren't going to leave by them just being told, even by the city police. They had to be pushed away and dragged away. And the police set up a barrier, and then people could start coming and going in one by one through the police barrier.
And you could imagine that this took an hour plus to do, so a lot of people were fearful and just left and didn't come in at all.
And these chants you referred to, they did come and go over that whole hour. They chant one thing, and they did say F Warren Farrell quite a few different times as a chant through that time. I could see definitely that a person would be quite intimidated by that. It's a very intimidating thing to do, for sure.
Yes.
And there was a professor at the University of Toronto. There was like 3 different actual groups protesting there. I don't know if they all came from the same reason, but one was, and this was the one that probably two disturbed me. One, this is the first year students sent to protest you by their women's studies professors.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird that they would actually send somebody like that. But the other one, which is larger and more organized, was that CUPE is the Canadian Union of Public Employees. The leader, this is not just a regular member of CUPE, but the leader of that chapter organized the actual Union of Public Employees to come as representing the Union of Public Employees to protest that talk. So that was very striking. The other thing I'd mention about it is that Paul Elam told me, I got to know Paul Elam as a direct result of publishing that video. He contacted me after that, and then I got closer to Paul as years went on. But he told me several times that particular video skyrocketed the traffic to A Voice for Men at that time. It just went right through the roof. So basically, launched them into the big view territory.
Yeah.
But anyways, how did I get into it? And specifically, I was interested in making small films at the time, and this camera came out that was really good and affordable. It was a Canon 5D Mark II, and you could make nice films, filmic look of something that the average person could afford. And it was after that particular protest that I thought, I've got to follow these issues. I was not unaware of the issues. I was not unaware of the kinds of things that feminists were doing at that time, but I'd never thought that I was going to wrap my life around it, But after that, watching the carryings on of that protest, Paul asked me after that, he said, are you getting into MRAs? And I said, I'm going to follow this issue as long as it's worth following, because it's pretty important. And so I'm still at it today, 8 years later.
Yes. So Steve, share with our audience, how did you go from taking an interest in it to monetizing it, to be able to, I know you haven't made a smashing living from this, but none of us do if we're interested in boys and men's issues. But I think what this program is about is how to do this and make a contribution to the world, to the next generation, and at the same time not alienate all the women in your life and not be lonely and alone, which I'll deal with in a little while directly. But also, let's take step 1: how to monetize it.
Yeah, it was easier back then to get started at monetizing, because I started my YouTube channel up just to post that first video. That was the first video I put up there, the protest. And so I created the YouTube channel, and I was looking around the YouTube channel. I thought, monetize it. I said, oh, great idea, monetize it. Mm-hmm. So I monetized it, and I started making money basically the first day I monetized it. I was shocked at the views it got. By the first evening, it was 70,000 views. We went to bed that night. The next morning, it was probably 200, 300,000 views, and it just went. Obviously the first week or so was the biggest, but then Since then, as you know, YouTube is cutting out everything. So I was making about $1,500 to $2,000 in ad revenue off of YouTube 2 years ago, and
1,500 to 2,000 a year or a month?
a month
A month. A month.
off of YouTube ad revenue. But now they demonetize everything. Some of it I'm shocked. No, not bad words in it. No tearing down anybody. Even the Flamengo files. When you're talking about an academic topic or something that's going on campus, YouTube will demonetize it. I have no idea why. Example is the Christine Blasey Ford. Janice did a Flamengo file saying to understand, the topic of it was to understand Christine Blasey Ford, you have to look at Palo Alto University, where she comes from. And she analyzed what the culture was like at Palo Alto University. And you know, Janice does not do character assassinations, and she does not use bad words. She does not do or say anything illegal. They demonetized it. That one went to between 2 and 3 million views. But that particular one, and this was before YouTube started to get draconian about demonetizing the videos. Since then, they've demonetized 80% of the videos on the channel. You can almost guarantee anything I post will be demonetized very quickly, and then I have to contest it with YouTube. But that video alone was my most successful one to publish, because it made about $10,000 or $12,000 in about a week.
This is the video of the protest.
No, this was the vote video of the protest. I'm guessing I probably made $2,000 or $3,000 off that one over the years, because it spikes every once in a while. But this Palo Alto one of Christine Blasey Ford and the Kavanaugh hearing,
right.
This one went really through the roof, even faster, and attracted higher paid ads. But YouTube saw that and they shut it down after, I think it was after 3, 4, 5 days. It made like $10,000 in revenue. I couldn't believe it. But
so you're saying shut it down. Did they shut down the monetization aspect?
Yeah.
Or they took the entire video down?
No, the video's still up. It was never taken down. But you can't make any money off it. Once they do that restricted monetization, that's the end of it. That video probably would have made $30,000 to $50,000 in revenue. But we haven't made any money since about that video to speak of. Now, at that time, it was normal to make about $1,500 US in ad revenue. On a good month, $2,000. On a bad month, $1,000. So let's average it out to $1,500 US in ad revenue. And we were putting out a fair number of videos quite regularly at that time. And almost all of them stayed monetized before YouTube started to crack down. About a little over 2 years ago, I think they started to crack down. And now we would have gone to, I think, a steady $2,000 to $3,000 a month in ad revenue if they kept like that. But now, this month, for instance, I will make about $130. in YouTube revenue. So in that period, we started to switch over to Patreon, and also we have some monthly donations coming in directly to PayPal. And then every once in a while, I'll do a fundraiser for a specific event. For instance, if I go to the international conference on men's issues, I'll try and raise at least some portion of the costs of going and covering the event.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit, Steve. So most people are familiar with Patreon and how to, and can investigate a process of how to do that. But most people associate PayPal with a method of transferring money and not a method of raising money. So can you explain how money can be raised by creating a video and then working with PayPal to help to monetize it?
Well, first of all, PayPal is right on the channel. So if you want to make a donation through PayPal, there's a button right on the front page of the channel. You can click there. But people won't generally find it unless you remind them. So you gotta be a bit of a salesman once in a while and say, hey, we really need some money to keep this going. If you can support us, direct donation to PayPal. So, and then the other thing is you can do a monthly subscription directly through PayPal.
Mhm.
Now you have to create a little PayPal button, right? And then when people click on it, describe the monthly contribution levels.
Mhm.
There's also Subscribe Star, another one similar to Patreon. And then for special projects, I think I was using GoFundMe,
Mhm.
or was there another one? I can't remember. I haven't done a one-time fundraiser in quite a long time.
Mhm.
But right, it's tough. Like to get a total revenue of $2,000 in a month is pretty hard now because of all the restrictions. And some people, like Sargon of Akkad, has been kicked completely off Patreon,
Mhm.
which is another setback for us because then his subscriber base was sort of in our subscriber base as well, and the entire subscriber base was, and he was such a big star that our entire subscriber base was pissed off at that, and we lost probably 50 to 70% of our subscribers who just quit Patreon
Wow.
because they banned Sargon of Akkad.
Mhm.
So if none of this had happened, this is just to describe the tightening and tightening and tightening, the kind of unpersoning and canceling that's going on in the media towards anyone who does not of left orientation, and anyone who is not in the feminist camp. You are sticking your neck out. They are, if you stick your neck out a bit, and they see it, they're going to try and chop it off.
Mhm.
So um, everything is forced into this kind of cancellation mode. We
Mhm.
would have been on track to make $4,000 to $5,000 steady income a month through if we hadn't set all these setbacks. Now, Patreon is probably our biggest one source, and that's hard to get it up to 1,000 a month because of all the subscribers we've got lost. So I'm giving you the bad news because there's a lot of bad news. And with this new election here, the Democrats are really targeting anyone who is on the right. Right now, I'm concerned about this because right now they're going for really the big fish. They're unpersoning and canceling the really, really big fish on the Republican side, anyone who has been an outspoken supporter of Trump. But this is a kind of unpersoning. It's really hard to say how deep it's going to go and how broad it's going to go and how it's going to grow. But I think it's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. It's going to be a risk. So if you're not truly a consistent and dedicated supporter of politically correct leftist ideology, you can become a target. That's my opinion on that. That's what I see going on.
Yes.
So it's a concern for sure. But here's the biggest thing for me, and this is the motivator for me. And partly what helps me is that I'm kind of all my other career life that I did before, that's all behind me now. I'm never getting back to that. I'll never can get back to that. Research in chemistry and database design and contracts with the federal government. I can't do any of that stuff anymore. I'm so far out of it. I'm not competitive. I'll never get another contract. So that was a major chunk of my professional life. I am not as high at risk from a canceling process as these younger guys are. Those young guys of their 20s and 30s, if you get canceled in this kind of cancel culture, that can be really hard to survive and thrive the rest of your life. Not impossible, but very hard. Much harder than it was for me. So, having said that, the big motivation for me is obviously not the money. There's a lot of ways to make money easier than doing this. But it's the fact that I feel I'm doing something that is important, valuable, I care about, and I'm being true to myself. I'm speaking my mind. A lot of people label me a conspiracy theorist right now because I'm trying to explain and understand what is the connecting dots, what are the connecting ties that make all of these concerted actions from the left make sense within the U.S. and globally. and you have to make a theory. You have to speculate. It's also a lot of it is speculation, but based on current events. So if you're good, I mean, you don't have to start speculating like I do, but if you want to get into, again, back to the men's rights issues things, like you did, you've had a long career, Warren, and you've written a lot of books, and maybe I can throw the question back at you. How is it? What's it like to publish in this topic today compared to, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I'll be happy to delve into that, but I know that you've done one other thing that I think is important for your audience to hear, which is that you've also cut back your standard of living and moved to a different country. Can you share those options too? Because I'd like to focus especially on ways that you can do this. So here's what I care about in my life. I care about ways that I can continue contributing, but I also want to continue to have a happy marriage. And I also want to be female positive, and I am female positive, and I always have been. So I want to be able to have a happy life, a healthy life, to live at a reasonable level economically, but at the same time, not. And so I want to put all those things together. And so one of the things that you have done more thoroughly than I have is to cut back on your lifestyle. I still live in a beautiful home in a beautiful area in an expensive community, Mill Valley in California, and in the middle of a park and stuff like that. And so my wife and I have worked really hard to monetize what we're doing, to be able to combine our resources, to be able to live quite normally / better than normally. And you have taken a bit of a different approach, which is to cut back all the encumbrance of all the expenses you have. So would you share that a bit, Steve?
Absolutely. And I that is a great point, because it is very important. You have to pay for whatever lifestyle you have somehow. I had a big house in Kingston, Ontario, and Kingston, Ontario is not that expensive, but for me, the weight of the mortgage was draining me. And I was sinking and losing what assets I had accumulated over about 30 years or more of work. I have some investments, but I was living off of those already, and the house was really dragging it down. It wasn't fully paid for. I started living without a car. Then I sold everything in the house, except one storage room, a storage container I still have a few important things in Ottawa. But I got rid of everything, and I realized that I'll be able to survive comfortably if I can survive simply with minimalistic things. So I first came down to the Dominican Republic just to get out of the winter after selling all my stuff in Canada, basically. I came for a week with my son, and then I started to hear stories of people who have been here for 20 and 30 years. And I started to see the prices of things down here. So I came back 2 or 3 times investigating more deeply. And I'll give you a sense of now what my cost of living is, because this is a big part of why I'm here. Not the only part, because the sense of freedom and liberty here is much greater than in Canada. And the weather is incredibly better than Canada.
The Dominican Republic weather is better than Canada?
You better believe it. I mean, I'm looking out the window here, and it's about 85 and sunny out there, and that is a normal day. So, but having said that, my cost of carrying that house, this is without including the mortgage in Canada, was about $1,000 to $1,200 per month. The mortgage was another $1,100 a month. But just let's talk about the cost, which is the high cost of heating with gas and electricity in Canada, and then the high cost of house insurance and the high cost of property taxes. I am moving shortly into a new apartment, brand new build. They're still building it. We're waiting for them to finish this apartment building here in Puerto Plata. It's up the hill, a little back from the water. It has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, nice beautiful ensuite, all finished to the T, a beautiful kitchen with an island and marble countertops, top level finishing. And it's going to be brand new, and it's got a gated entranceway, locked, so when you come with your car or your motorcycle or whatever, you put a wireless button and the gate slides open for you. So anyways, I'm going to be paying approximately $430 per month. Okay?
Wow.
It's less than most people's property tax for a small house. Just the property tax.
Yes.
So, and then my transportation costs are basically, I bought I think it's about $1,800 or $1,900 US Chinese motorcycle, and it gets me everywhere I want to go. There's so little rain here, and it's almost never cold, that there's only maybe 2 or 3 days in a year where I couldn't go where I wanted to go on my motorcycle. It cost me almost nothing. So there's
Wow.
no car cost. You can buy a car here. Excuse me. So the overall here, my sense is you can live comfortably here and nicely for about 2,000 US dollars per month. Some people live on $1,000 US a month here. Believe it or not, it's true. I've met them. That's a little too frugal for me. I like a little bit better lifestyle, you know. But if I was to try and spend $3,000 per month here, I'd have to look for things to spend it on, you know,
Wow. Yeah.
because I do everything I want here when I want to,
Then
and I pay between 2,000, about 2,000 plus a little bit per month for everything.
wow. Then you should also explain to everybody that you are now a salesperson for the Chamber of Commerce of the Dominican Republic. That's a joke, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've spoken on the details of the cost of things before. Suffice to say, as a general feature, I say I live twice as well at half the price. It's actually less than half the price, but
Wow. That's
yeah.
really incredible. So the approach that I've taken has been, I took when I was doing the work on the women's movement, and which was in the late 60s and early 70s, I was earning a significant amount of money speaking around the world on those issues. I saved a fair amount of that. And I taught myself, my father should get a lot of credit for this. He was very good at investing. And I ended up having a little bit of a decent gift, not a great gift, but a decent gift in investing, and sort of took my money, a fair amount of the money, and invested it. And so to some degree, the work on the women's movement has well invested, helped finance me to do the stuff on boys and men that I'm doing today. And then I also, but I want to move over from the economic to a combination of economic and not having to be there are two main groups of men's rights groups. One is MGTOW, men going their own way, and the other one is incels. And both of them have the same basic theme, which is incels are not people who don't want to be with women. The title is involuntarily celibate, and the involuntarily is really crucial. And men going their own way are not a group of men who don't necessarily want to be with women. They've just found no way of being with women that allows them to be free to be who they wish to be. And so it's really important for us to first look at the fact that these are not people that hate women. They're people that actually would like to be able to be in a position in the society at this time to love women in a way that can allow them to have integrity and to understand their issues as well. And so it's really, so part of what I did I was married for 11 years, and then I did get a divorce, moved out here to California. And then it was 21 years between that marriage and my next marriage, which was 26 years ago. I met the woman who was to become my wife. And so we've been together for 26 years. But in that meantime, I dated only women. I dated women, and I made it clear to women very quickly. Usually during the first thing I did is I didn't ask women out per se. This is very important. I shared with women my enjoyment with some women that I enjoyed being with. I shared with them how much I enjoyed being with them and what I valued about them. And they usually reciprocated. And if they didn't, then that was the end of that. But they reciprocated. And so then I left some space. And in the leaving of space, it allowed the woman to say or volunteer, well, let's get together again. or I'd love to get together again. Or I'd say, shall we get together again? And so the shall we is different from I'd like to invite you out to dinner. Because if you invite her out to dinner, you should pay for her at dinner. But the shall we get together again then leaves it in her hands to be able to say, yeah, we shall. Maybe we should meet for dinner. And if it's something that involves money, she has shared in the decision to do something or initiated the decision to do something that involves money, as opposed to another way of getting together, which is taking a walk on the beach or in the park, or just finding a very beautiful place in your community to spend time together that doesn't involve money. But when the first thing that you do that gets together does involve money, the framework of having it be something that she that she's part of the initiation process allows you, when you get to dinner, and the check comes. Oftentimes, women, when the check comes, will go to the ladies' room and expect on some level, or you feel pressure on some level to pay the bill or to initiate paying the bill before she comes back. But that change this so to make sure that this type of phenomenon changes, to make it clear that you are very much a person who respects women a lot, and therefore respects women, expects women and men, a woman and a man, to both share in the payment for any given meal with each other. And so you don't have to be rigid about that. You can say, when the check comes, some version of, and this is what I usually did, well, shall I pay for this, or shall maybe we seem to be having a great connection together. Shall I pay for this, or and then maybe you can pay next time, or you can make a dinner for me next time, or some version of that. And most of the women would say some version of, let's share it this time, or they would volunteer one of those efforts. Now, I did have different responses to that. I could see that on some nights I was very interested in being with a woman I was very attracted to. And I could feel that when I suggested that we shared, I could feel that her energy went down. And that was the end of a likely sexual connection that evening. So you have to have that part of your body in check and be willing to have the guts to forfeit, moving from paying for dinner to being sexual. But normally, and one of the most amusing incidents I had with that was I was dating a woman. The first date with a woman who was the president of a significant NOW chapter, National Organization for Women chapter, and she was one of the significant feminists in the country, not the leading, and she broke down crying. And she said, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm breaking down crying, but I really like you, and I was hoping that we would be able to have a future together. But whenever a man has not wanted to pay for me, it's always because he didn't like me that much. And I don't sense that you don't like me, but I'm fearing that you don't like me, and that's why you're not volunteering to pay." And she says, "I know that's as old-fashioned as it can be, and exactly the opposite of everything I believe." And I put my arms around her and I said, "Thank you for your vulnerability and being open and honest about that. This is all, we're all part of our epigenetic programming." I didn't use epigenetic because at that time I didn't know what epigenetic meant, but now it's what I understand to be epigenetic programming of being male or female, and women's desire to select men who will protect them, and paying for them as part of protecting them. And me being tempted to be a woman's hero by paying for her and expecting something that I'm more addicted to, like sexuality, than the average woman is addicted to at that point in my life anyway. And so all of these types of things come together. So I hope what I'm sharing there is, if you don't want to go your own way, or if you don't want to be involuntarily celibate, you will forfeit, you will learn from this experience which women are willing to share the economic burdens with you. Now, the woman I ended up marrying is a very attractive and feminine woman, and she had never paid a single penny with any man, for any man on any date in her entire life. And she was in her, I think 50 at the time, and or whatever it was, she was 40 at the time. I was 50 at the time, and
That probably wasn't uncommon for a woman of that age at that time, right? To not have ever paid.
not an
Yeah.
attractive woman, and not one that was feminine, because femininity gives off a vibe and a chemistry of attracting a man who will protect you. And so she had that femininity, but she also, ran her. And one of the things that attracted me to her was that she, even though she was a single mom, she was in the process of raising two children, an entrepreneur. Very rarely are single moms entrepreneurs. They usually take psychological checkout jobs so that they can be at low risk situations and be with their children to a greater degree. She had refused many job offers and to be an entrepreneur and to run her own business. And so I liked that about her, that she was a risk taker, that she had courage, that she had entrepreneurial skills. But I did share with her that, this was my perspective. I asked before our first date if she would be good enough to read The Myth of Male Power, which had just come out at that time in 1993. And she agreed to do that, and she read not all of it, but most of it, enough to get a good flavor of what that was about. It. She was not inhibited by it, and so so you won't have The Myth of Male Power to give a woman to read, but you can refer her to books like The Myth of Male Power, The Boy Crisis, if she has children, and ask her to read them, and even before you get together. And if she reads them before you get together, you'll know something about her. You'll select for the type of woman who is able to hear the types of issues you care about. And if you have the courage to be able to not to be able to do that, to be able to put forward who you are, then the woman will not experience it as an insult to her that you're not willing to pay. She'll experience the courage that it takes to speak up about what you need and what you want, as long as when you're with her, you're spending at least as much time, preferably more time, listening to her, drawing out her perspectives. When you disagree with her perspectives, not thinking in your mind's eye, doing what I call self-listening, listening to yourself, prepare your response that can help her understand that you have a better perspective than she has, but rather facilitating her perspective being drawn out. That last part is crucial. If you want a good woman, you have to be a good man. You have to be a good listener, not just a good talker. And so,
If I can say it, it sounds like you're describing how to make a genuine person to person connection in general.
yes,
Like
yes,
that's what you would do to someone or with someone that you found a true connection with. You share back and forth something genuine about who you are and what you think, you know, and genuine in their relationship.
yes. And the genuineness, so the genuineness is very important, but very often people who have a lot of integrity and who are genuine are wanting to share and demonstrate the rationale or the emotional experiences that led to their best argument for helping the other person experience their perspective. And that's what I'm explaining to not be doing while you're listening. So while you're listening, I'm asking you to, for a while, just drop your perspectives, compartmentalize and hear what the perspectives are of the person who disagrees with you politically or whatever, or this could be the same sex or what brother, sister, parents, friends. Um, don't take in your mind's eye and take people who disagree with you and put them into the cemetery of your friendships.
This sounds a lot like a term I heard about years ago called, or a process that I think therapists use. And the term it comes to mind is bracketing. Have you heard the term before?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. My understanding was that it's sort of bracketing your own worldview and setting it aside in order to try and get a sense of what the other person's worldview truly is.
Yes. And it's so much, when people, when feminists say things like, what is there about no that you don't understand? There's about 1,000 things about no that are much more complex than verbal no's. And and that is true because only a small percentage of your total communication is your words. The great majority is in your body language, your tone of voice, your inferences, the way you sit back and come forward. And so you've got to be sure that when someone else is talking, but particularly when they're not, um, when you're not agreeing with them, you have to see it as this person is taking you to a movie, and that movie is their story, and you're getting to know their story and who they are. So your job is to listen to what they're saying and see that what they're saying is just a piece in the puzzle of their story. And your real job has to be an internal, active, genuine curiosity to find out that you've just listened to a piece of their puzzle. And so now is not the time to come in and tell them what the real truth is, your truth, but rather to ask more questions out of genuine curiosity until they are encouraged by your curiosity to give you more and more pieces of the puzzle, their puzzle, until you're able to see their full picture. And then as you're able to do that and letting them know what you heard and checking out with them whether you have, asking them, did I distort anything? And if they said they distorted anything, not respond by saying some version of, well, actually I said I didn't distort that, I said that. When the customer
Don't get
listens.
defensive, sort of.
Yes, exactly. The great majority of us are defensive, and then asking them after they say no, now you have it right. Asking them if there's anything that you missed, because you may have gotten everything right that you said, but you may have missed something that was important to them. And then when you don't miss anything, ask them. Now they'll feel secure enough. Now they will feel secure and comfortable in your presence. And so if you ask them, is there anything more you want to add? They'll be willing to add something that oftentimes they didn't even know they were thinking, because it was rare that they ever got this type of emotional support. When you know how to listen like that, and I've been doing couples. If you feel all this is like, wow, I can't do this. I've been doing. Let me share that I've been doing couples communication courses for the last 30 years, and I'm now putting one of those courses onto Zoom, so it'll be available to anybody. And so anyone that wants to ask me more about that can just go to, the Warren at warrenfarrell.com, which is my email. Write me about it, and I'll share more with you about it on some level in the future. But the important thing is that this is, if you want to be sustainable in men's and boys' issues, and you also want to have love in your life, genuine love, and you want to have a woman who feels attended to, and you don't want to be involuntarily celibate or go your own way, there is a way to do it, but it requires more levels of effort than it does to just make money directly. But when you learn this, you'll not only have a good relationship, but any children that you have will see a way of communicating with your partner that will be wonderful role modeling for them, that will help them have emotional intelligence in their world and not make them afraid of being with a woman, because they'll know what a woman or anybody that you're in life with, including your children or your parents, need to understand. My father was, when he heard that I was going to write books for a living, he was livid. He said, Warren, only 1 out of 100 people, get published. Find a publisher who are writers. Most writers never finish their book, but if you finish your book, there's about a 1% chance you'll find a publisher. And if you find it, and if you can't find a publisher, you'll never find a wife, and you'll never therefore have children, and you'll never, be happy in that type of way. And so it's so important that that you learn those communication skills as well.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're going to go in this environment, you're going to be communicating with people,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're going to need relationships. You're going to build relationships, or your work probably won't go anywhere.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And more importantly, your happiness will not go anywhere.
That's
Uh,
a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because most of us, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of our happiness comes from the positive relationships we have in our lives on a day-to-day basis. I
yeah.
mean, face-to-face relationships mostly, but also online relationships.
Mhm. Absolutely. We often hear people say, "Oh, you hear liberals say, all of masculinity is social construction," and you hear conservatives say all masculinity is natural. And when people ask me that question, is it nature or is it nurture? I say yes, because it's both
Yeah.
nature and nurture. And they say, well, what percentage nature, what percentage nurture? And I say about 80% nature and about 80% nurture. And they say, are you bad at math? Or are you just dead?
2 + 2 = 5.
Exactly. And and the answer for that, and just one example of that, is that one of the many parts of your brain, but the most important part of your brain, that responds to social interaction is called the RCZ, the rostral cingulate zone. And that rostral cingulate zone gets dopamine when people approve of you, and when people respect you, you feel that respect and approval. And so here is the social construction of you're approved for being a man by doing certain things. That taps into your biological heritage and evolution, from the part of your brain that gives you rewards in increased dopamine, the feel good drug, as a result of your social interaction. So your biology is interacting with your social interaction, and your brain changes, your stress levels change, your thousands of things about you change. And I say thousands of things. That was not just off the cuff. There are thousands of things, from your guts to your cells to your telomeres, that change. And if you want to dig deeper into this about what changes when you get social approval, dig into the Boy Crisis book, especially the stuff around fathers, and the way even a man's brain changes when he has a child, and when that child is when he devotes time to the child, his brain changes very differently than when he has a child and he believes that that child leads to a responsibility of him earning more money, that disconnects him from the child
Hmm.
as a result of being connected to the child. And his brain does not change in nearly the same way as it does when he has a significant amount of time that he puts into his children. And look at the economics of this. Look at the fact that depending on where you live in the United States, or if you move to the Dominican Republic, you can do this much less expensively. That in the United States terms, whether you live in a 50,000 or 70,000, a certain type of part of the United States, once your family of four earns between 50 and 70,000 a year, the great majority of happiness comes from the time you spent with your children. Once you're at 50 to 70,000 a year, a dad's time is more important than a dad's dime. People often
That
say,
makes
well,
sense.
where I live, I can't do that on that amount of money per year. I ask you then to do Brule think. Brule think is to not be imprisoned by where you live. I Where I live is a choice. Whether I live in Canada or the Dominican Republic, whether I live in a house that costs four times as much, or a home that it's about the same, that costs only a fraction of that. So where you live is part of your overall lifestyle choice. You don't have to live in the most expensive place, and therefore put that pressure on yourself.
Or
I
at least you always have options.
always
You
have
know,
a
there always, in fact, in my experience, there's always way more options than you can think of.
mhm,
And if you spend some time really brainstorming it, you're going to come across, or and talking with people you trust about this. You
yes.
know, other people have ideas, and have ideas that you may have never thought of. And that's played into my life quite a bit. But I want to throw one other thing out there, and
Mhm.
I'll let you get back to that stream of thought. It was a lot easier for me to make this decision because my son was left the house at that point, you know.
Mhm.
And with kids, and there was a comment in the comment stream here and I didn't get a chance to respond to it, but it was about whether you could do this kind of thing, raise kids in the Dominican Republic. You can, by the way. I did make a video on two alternative ways for non-traditional ways for men to satisfy their desire to reproduce, and minimize their risk to the various legal and social issues on that. But in any case, I'll leave it at that. It was a lot easier for me personally to make this decision and to make it a real after my son left. I was kind of in a way trapped in Kingston because my son's mother lived in Kingston, and if I left Kingston prior to while he was growing up, I would lose my connection.
Yes.
So that was too much for me to accept through those years. So I did spend a lot of years there, not really wanting to be there,
Yes.
until I could make this move.
Good. If you have children, I really encourage you to read the chapter in the boy crisis that in your divorce, for example. I encourage you to read the chapter in the boy crisis that deals with if you're divorced, the 4 must-dos. And the headlines of the 4 must-dos is that children who do best almost as well after a divorce as they do in an intact family have 4 things that almost invariably happen. One is that the father and mother are equally involved with the children, or close to equally involved. Number 2 is that the father and mother do not live more than 20 minutes drive time from each other, because that forces children to give up activities or friendships in order to go to the other parent's house. You want your children to develop friendships. You want them to be involved in activities, especially in all 3 types of what I call the liberal arts of sports: pickup sports, pickup team sports, and individual sports like tennis or gymnastics, where you're part of a team, but the effort is significantly to be in the individual. It's significantly focused on individual effort. Number 3, that the child or children are not able to hear any bad mouthing from mom to dad or dad to mom. And that bad mouthing includes not bad mouthing only, but also negative body language. When your children say, oh, had a wonderful time with dad this past weekend, or a wonderful time with mom, and then the mom or dad don't sort of turn away from you, don't say anything, but that give body language that says, if you want to talk about positive things about your dad or your mom, you're not going to get much attention from me. So deprivation of attention when your child brings up something positive about the other parent. And number 4, that the father and mother are involved in consistent couples communication or relationship counseling. The evidence for that has really just been much more recent, but much very, very evident. And this doesn't mean, because people oftentimes do go to relationship counselors and they say, well, we go to counselors. But when I press on that, it's often when emergencies occur. When there's an emergency occur, there's a deadline. When there's a deadline, everybody is forcing out the bottom line, and you don't get a chance to have a gentle connection to the best intent of your partner. And so therefore, emergency counseling only tends to reinforce your negative experiences or feelings about your partner, which seeps into your children hearing or feeling those negative feelings, and therefore making your children afraid of getting married, for fear that they may have a divorce where there's all this challenge involved. So pay attention to those 4 must-dos, and in the Boy Crisis book, they're much more in-depth explained, and how to operationalize them as well.
Sounds great, Warren. I just cut this, and I agree with all the things you said. I think that the last 2 are harder to address in my mind, because it requires both people to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. And in many divorces, they are divorced because they just can't stay on the same page. But I agree with you, folks. Have a read of The Boy Crisis. I know I've read some of Warren's work, including The Myth of Male Power, and I say it's brilliant from cover to cover. So you'll get more tips and information out of there than you think you might before you start that book. I wanted to address this question here from Sorrow Heart. Does Steve feel that he's betraying his people and his culture by leaving Canada? That's a good question. My Unequivocal answer is no, not at all. I started the workplace in 1982. In 1984, I remember the VP of Research and Development at Dow Chemical gathered us all together and said that for the foreseeable future, we're going to preferentially hire and promote women. And all us men starting out our career there had a sense of dread. We didn't really believe it, but it got worse and worse every year as the years went by. And then we saw discriminatory laws put in place. We saw the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for Canada protect the rights and freedoms of every category of person in Canada except white men, explicitly excluded. And we saw after that advertisements for jobs in the Canadian government that said, in no uncertain terms, everybody except white men can apply. And this got worse and worse. And when I faced divorce, I saw how horribly slanted towards the mother the family court was. And I can go on and on examples with this. I did not abandon my country abandoned me. And by the end of my years there, I can feel the animosity towards white men in particular, and me as an older white man. The three most maligned cohorts of people in Canada today are old, white, male. And I fit all three of those categories. In no uncertain terms, my country kicked me out, and well, I wouldn't say kicked me out. My country doesn't want me anymore. That's my conclusion. My own culture doesn't want me. And I came to the conclusion in my 50s, early 50s or middle 50s, I can't remember the exact time, that I will not stay where I'm not wanted anymore in my life. I will keep moving until I find a place where they want me and value me. And I have that here in the Dominican Republic in no uncertain terms. So that's my answer to that.
Well, I have to go, but I do want to encourage you, Steve, to consider part of your monetization program talking to the Chamber of Commerce of the Dominican Republic. Before I was a joke, now I'm actually serious. I think you have really contributed an understanding. I've talked to my wife about, we should consider that, and the person who I cited, of course, was you. And so, we will do it because the children are here in the area. But on the other hand, this is, I think, what you just said is very powerful. And of course, it applies to the United States, and it applies to almost all of Scandinavia, and it applies to a good part of Europe, and certainly. Next Monday, I'm going to be doing another interview. I'm doing a series of interviews with the former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, John Anderson, and we'll be talking about how this is also true in Australia, among other things. But this is very. It is. I hope this has been helpful, informative, practical. We have tried, Steve and I, not to be Pollyannish about this. And to present the barriers. But if you're inspired to do boys and men's issues and get involved, recognize that that we're all part of the same family boat. And when only one sex wins, both sexes lose. We need to care about everyone and be in this whole process of humanity together. And you're doing, and this is the portion that's left out in this point in history. And if you happen to be the right person at the right place at the right time, and you're willing to make some of the sacrifices and not be everybody's hero. If you have that type of balance in your personality, then delve into boys' issues and men's issues and tap into the ones that ring in your soul. This is something I could really make a contribution to. This is something I inherently feel strongly about. Don't just hear something that I'm saying, but take a careful read through all the sections of the myth of male power and all the sections of the boy crisis and just choose something. Or, when I spoke at the time that Steve Brule interviewed me, one of the first time, I had just spoken at a international conference on men's issues. And at that, if you look up that presentation, I went through 10 different men's issues that I thought were the most important. So look over those issues and say, not interested, not interested, not, oh, wow, that interests me. So find something that resonates with your heart. And then remember what I said about communication and selection, and the selection of women, and the listening process. And I think that you'll be able to live a happy life that contributes in a unique way at this point in history at this time.
Terrific, terrific summary, Warren. My own summary will be much more short, and it refers to what I just said, is that don't stay where you're not wanted. And to me, that means in a marriage, in a job, in a country, in a city, in a sports team. Look, if they don't want you, I guarantee you there's groups and people in other places that do want you. There just is. And you leave a bad situation that you can't fix, you will find a better situation. You will. So with that, thank you so much, Warren, for coming on the show again.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much. And thank you, folks, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this session with Coffee with Steve. As I like to remind everybody at the end of the session, do something you love today. Do something you love every day. If you don't have something you love to do, find something you love to do, because this is your life. No matter what's going on in the world, this is the life you have to enjoy. So take some time every day to really enjoy it. And with that, see you later.